Nonetheless, it was a necessary step. Oculus's fourth VR headset, this one would really start adding some great features. This is the Oculus Rift, or the CV1. CV standing for commercial version, because this would be the first non-phone VR that would actually be aimed for consumers. The Oculus Rift would come out in March 27th, 2016 and be $600. It would have a 1080 by 1200 resolution per eye with an 87 degrees FOV and a 90 Hz refresh rate. 2016 itself was just a big year for VR because of two really successful headsets, the HTC Vive and of course the Oculus Rift. This is when VR would finally start really taking shape and grabbing the attention of millions of people, myself included. However, the Oculus Rift would struggle a little bit compared to the HTC Vive because it only came with one base station and a controller, because HTC Vive would give you two base stations and its own separate controllers. It took Oculus a while, but at the end of 2016, they came out with these. These are the Oculus Touch controllers. Two separate controllers that you could put in each hand and move in different directions. HTC would have something similar, but it'd look a little different. The button layout is quite similar to an Xbox controller, but you may notice these big rings. These big rings are here just to help track where the controllers are to the headset and its surroundings. So they may look weird, but for now, they're very necessary, because you'd actually get to be able to move your hands in a 3D space, which means we've finally made the jump from 3 degrees of freedom to 6. So with 3 degrees of freedom, you would be able to move your head up, down, left, and right and tilt your head, which was pretty good, but now you can actually move your whole body up, down, left, or right, or tilted. 6 degrees of freedom is very important for immersing people into virtual worlds. And with these new 6 degrees of freedom, headsets that only had 3 degrees of freedom would start heading out the door. And since this headset was actually made for consumers, there's actually a few games that are worth mentioning. Super Hot VR, Arizona Sunshine, and Job Simulator, just to name a few. I picked these games in particular just because I feel like these three can really show what games in VR can really be, and really show how to use the new controllers. The Oculus Rift would be a pretty good headset and add some other features. It'd have a microphone so you could actually talk to other people in VR, it'd have speakers, it would still have no headphone jack, and it would have outside-in tracking. And it'd be the first Oculus headset to come with an IPD adjustment, so you could actually adjust the lenses inside the headset to fit your face. Even though it was the most expensive Oculus headset at the time, it would still sell 547,000 units. Even though this headset was a little overshadowed by the HTC Vive, it was still really good, and in my opinion, is still one of the most memorable headsets. When it came for Oculus to make a new headset, their fifth headset would actually not be the CV2. They would actually never make a CV2. Their next headset would actually be more similar to the Gear VR than the Oculus Rift. This is the Oculus Go. This headset would step VR forward, but in ways, it actually kind of made it go backwards. This headset would come out April 30th, 2018. It would be cheaper than the last one, being $200 or $250 depending on the version you got. It would have a 1280 by 1440 resolution per eye. It would have an 89 degrees FOV and a 60 Hz refresh rate. And even at the time, that was pretty low. And actually, we have to add one more thing from this headset. It would come with 32 or 64 gigabytes of storage depending on the version you got, which is the reason why they have two different prices. So then why did it come with storage? What was the point of having storage? Well, this would be the first Oculus headset that would not need a PC or a phone or any other equipment to work. So instead of having games on a PC or a phone, it had to be in the headset itself. A standalone VR headset that was only $200 sounded great and was a big step forward. However, there would be one crucial detail about this headset that would make it take a step back. This headset would return to only having 3 degrees of freedom and not 6 like the Oculus Rift does. So you wouldn't be able to move your body in a virtual space and you only be able to move your head. So it worked about the same as the Gear VR and has more in common with the Gear VR than the Oculus Rift. It'd be more pandered to watching videos and movies instead of playing games, even though there were a few games. Even the controller that the Oculus Go came with was more similar to the Gear. The only real difference that it had is that the volume buttons were on the headset itself and not on the controller. Other than that, they were pretty much the same thing. The Oculus Go is more of just a glorified Gear VR, or seen as a worse but cheaper version than the Oculus Rift. It would come with a microphone, speakers, and for the first time, a headphone jack. However, it would have no positional tracking and no IPD adjustment. What really saved this headset was the price, which is the reason why it sold 2 million units. Even if the Oculus Go did have some issues, it still shows that making VR cheaper will make more people buy VR, and that would be a crucial idea that Oculus would have to learn, and they would use that tactic on their most successful headset to date. Once again, the Oculus Go had some good things and some drawbacks, but the good things would really pay off soon. Now I'm supposed to talk about what Oculus's next headset is, but I actually really can't say which one the sixth one is. And the reason for that is because Oculus decided to do something a little different this time. Oculus would try to figure out what direction to take VR in. So for them to figure that out, they decided to release 2 headsets in 1 year. They would be pretty similar to each other, however have a few key differences. So the first one I'm going to show is this one. This is the Oculus Quest 1. The reason why I'm doing this one first is because it was announced before the other one. It also comes first alphabetically to the other headset. The Quest 1 would come out May 20th, 2019. It would be $400 to $500 depending on the version. It would have a 1440 by 1600 resolution per eye, and a 93 degrees FOV with a 72 Hz refresh rate. It would either come with 64 GB or 128 GB depending on the version. The Quest 1 would almost be like a jack of all trades from all the previous headsets. You wouldn't need a PC for this headset, and no one needs to get one for it. But if you do have a PC and VR games on it, you can actually use a link cable to link to your computer and actually play those games. So now instead of needing 2 versions of the same game, you only need the one, which really helped, but that's not the Oculus Quest's greatest feature. The main thing that stuck out from this headset was the inside-out tracking. This would be different from outside-in tracking. So for outside-in tracking to work, you would have base stations around your room, and then that would be able to track where the headset is. Even though outside-in tracking is still widely used today for certain headsets, if you didn't have these cameras around, then you wouldn't be able to use your VR headset, so the only way it would work is if the headset was only 3 degrees of freedom. So to fix this, what inside-out tracking does, instead of the cameras tracking the headset would have cameras on it, and it would be able to track itself. So now the headset can have 6 degrees of freedom without needing to set up cameras. This change would leave the headset to be more convenient and accessible to people, so it has all the great things from PC VR and standalone VR into one. The only real issue with inside-out tracking is if you put the controllers behind your back or where the cameras can't see them, then it really doesn't know what to do, and it can look a little weird. Speaking about controllers, these are the controllers that the Quest 1 would come with. These controllers are almost the exact same as the Rift controllers. The only change that they did is that they moved the ring from the bottom to the top. This was done just so the controllers could have better tracking overall. And around this time, some of the greatest VR games would come out. Asgard's Wrath, Half-Life Alyx, and Boneworks would be some really great titles. So this headset already sounds great overall, but there's still one thing that I'm missing. A really cool feature that Oculus has been working on. A couple months after the Quest came out, an update would come out where you could actually use your hands instead of controllers. There were certain games where the cameras on the headset would actually be able to track your hands and you would be able to use your hands in VR. Even though most games weren't actually capable of using the hands correctly, there would be a few games that would actually be able to show how good the technology has come. This headset would almost have nothing to hold it back. The only real issue that this headset had is that the graphics card that was in the headset was a little weak. Other than that, the headset really did not skip out. It had a microphone, speakers, headphone jack, inside-out tracking, and an IPD adjustment. This headset would be pretty successful. Even though Oculus has never gave us a definitive answer on how many units have been sold on this headset, it's safe to say that this headset has at least sold 1.1 million units. One of the big reasons why this VR headset did so well is because there really wasn't anything else like it at the time. It was just so different and unique to everything else. And because of all these reasons, the question wasn't, will we ever get a Quest 2? It was now, the Quest 2 is inevitable, but when will we get it? Before I can talk about the Quest 2, I still have to talk about the headset that came out at the same time as the Quest 1. This is the Oculus Rift S. This would be the first headset that I actually got, and only headset for now. The Rift S would come out May 20th, 2019, same as the Quest. It would be priced at $400. It would have a 1280 by 1440 resolution per eye. It would have an 88 degrees FOV, which even for the time was pretty low, with an 80 Hz refresh rate, also low for the time. The Rift S would have many similarities to the Quest 1. The main difference being it wasn't a standalone headset, you needed a PC to run it, which is the reason why this one has no storage. The main advantage of having this one on a PC is so the graphics card on the computer runs the games and not the headset itself. This would make games look and run a little better, and that was really the biggest difference from the Quest and the Rift S. Even the controllers that it came with were the exact same. I'm pretty sure they're not different at all. I'm still going to name some games that came around when this headset came out, just because I think these games were really noticeable and I think they deserve it. Those games being Beat Saber, Blades and Sorcery, and Lone Echo. Some very iconic titles that are still played today. Even though there isn't really much difference from this headset from the Quest, there is still one little thing that's interesting that is different from the other. Surprisingly, Oculus would get Lenovo to help make the head strap for the Rift S. This strap would actually be easier to adjust and was more comfortable. I have tried other default straps from other headsets, and I would have to say the Rift S is my favorite. So at least now you don't have to spend any extra money just to make the headset a little more comfortable. Even though this headset wasn't as popular as the Quest, it was still pretty good. It had a microphone, had speakers, a headphone jack and inside-out tracking, just like the Quest 1 does, but surprisingly, there would be no manual IPD adjustment, which really hurt this headset. Even though you can go in the software and try to change it in there, it really doesn't work too well. And really weirdly, I tried to look everywhere to see how many units were sold, and I couldn't find a definitive answer, so I really don't know how much this headset is sold. The only conclusion that I can really come up with is that this headset sold worse than the Quest 1. And before I stop talking about this headset, I just want to quickly compare the Quest 1 to the Rift S, just to show how the Quest 1 probably sold more than the Rift S. The Quest 1 just had a lot more going on with it. It had a higher resolution, it had a higher degrees of view, the Quest would have a manual IPD adjustment, Rift S wouldn't, and the Quest would have hand tracking, and the Rift S did not have hand tracking. The Rift S just wasn't built with hand tracking in mind. And sure, the Hertz was a little bit better, but it really didn't make too much of a difference. And because of these reasons, this would be the last Rift headset that they'd ever make. It was hard to see the Rift line finally being discontinued, but we had to move on. Now I can finally talk about the best-selling headset to date. Most of you already know what this one is. This is the Oculus Quest 2, or MetaQuest 2. I'll get to the reason why it has two names, but I'm just going to call it the Oculus Quest 2 just for consistency. The Quest 2 would launch in October 12th, 2020. It would be $300 to $400. It would have a 1,800